What happens when your childhood best friend treats you like trash for entertainment? Meet Suzuki Kazuma, a quiet loner who spent years living in the shadow of Takaya Rua, one of Japan's top idols and his so-called childhood friend. But to her, he's not a friend. He's a servant to mock and humiliate. When she sets him up for the cruelest prank of his life, something inside him finally snaps. He does the unthinkable. He cuts ties with her completely. But walking away from someone as powerful and obsessed as Rua isn't that simple. Now, he must survive her ruthless sabotage at an elite academy built on hierarchy and control. And when he meets a shy voice actress, also suffering under Rua's cruelty, his quiet rebellion is about to shake the entire school. She smirks at him, pointing his way with a look that dares him to explode like he always does. To her, the idea that he's her childhood friend is almost insulting. And in that instant, something inside him shifted, something buried deep finally broke. Takaya Shikiru isn't just any girl. She's one of the country's top idols and the granddaughter of Takaya Shiki Tao, the head of the powerful Teikan group. Her status and influence reach far beyond what most people could ever imagine. To put it simply, she lives like a modern-day princess. Meanwhile, Suzuki Kazuma, our main character, is the complete opposite. He's quiet, forgettable, and friendless, and most importantly, completely alone. He sits at the bottom of the social ladder, with his only claim to anything being the fact that he grew up beside Rua. For years, he followed her like a shadow, almost like some loyal servant, even though that was never the life he wanted. All he ever hoped for was something normal, real friends, a girlfriend, and a simple, steady life. He didn't reach this point overnight. He tried to tell her how he truly felt, but it backfired. She spat her words at him, asking if he was an idiot, and reminding him he should stay in his place, calling him a useless, gloomy nobody whose only value was being her childhood friend. That title alone, she said, was more than he deserved, and he should let that sink in. Her voice echoed in his mind, "Know your place," words she had thrown at him for years. Each time, they settled on him like a heavy curse he could never shake. Even after everything, he still held on to the hope of living a simple, ordinary life. That spring, during his first year of high school, he sat at his desk after receiving a surprising message from Rua. She told him to meet her at the station the next day at 3 p.m., because Ya and a few others were going to karaoke and wanted to know if he would join them. He assumed Ya meant he Ayaka, the flashy girl from school he had never once spoken to. The whole thing left him puzzled. Why would they invite him, of all people? Almost as if she could read his confusion, Rua brought up how he had once mentioned wanting friends, maybe even a girlfriend. She said joining their group would be the best way to start, urging him to take that first step. The thought lit something in him. Maybe this was the moment he had been waiting for, a chance to finally change. With that hope pushing him forward, he dressed as nicely as he could, and even got a fresh haircut. When the time came, he reached for the door, telling himself this was the beginning of a new version of him. But the moment he entered the room, laughter exploded around him. They mocked him for actually showing up, calling him gross, teasing his haircut, and making fun of the jacket he had proudly chosen. Rua laughed the hardest, pretending to defend him by saying he really did try. Only Ayaka stayed silent, watching everything without joining in. Kazuma stood there in complete silence. Not a word came out as he let the noise of their laughter fade into the background. In that moment, he understood everything. It had all been a setup. Rua rose from her seat and asked why he was just standing there, acting as if nothing was wrong. She encouraged him to cry in front of everyone, claiming she had even bet 10,000 yen that he would. Ignoring her taunts, he murmured a single question, barely loud enough to hear. He wanted to know if he had done something to deserve this. He needed an answer. With a cold, satisfied grin, she told him it was simple. He was her servant. She urged him to struggle a bit more, to make the scene entertaining for her. Then she said what she had never admitted before. She had always hated the idea of him being her childhood friend. Kazuma's eyes widened, as if something inside him finally snapped. It felt like old chains breaking apart, the sound of a connection tearing for good. That moment became his final limit. With a hollow stare, he told her he felt the same, and that it was time to cut all ties between them. Rua froze, stunned by his words. Enraged, she demanded to know how he dared speak back to her, insisting someone like him had no right. But Kazuma wasn't wrong. She was the one who started this. The girl reacted sharply, insisting she had every reason to resent him while denying him the same. A troublesome child like her rising to idol status made the world feel absurd. The main character slammed the table with all his strength and walked off, declaring the matter decided. The others at the table, sweating nervously, muttered about how awkward it looked and told Ruashan she didn't need to worry about him. But the girl was crushed. Ian then noticed the damage and questioned whether the table was truly broken, shocked that it seemed to have shattered from a single strike. He refused to believe the main character caused it, assuming the table must have been weak from the start, since an ordinary person shouldn't be able to break it with their hands. The group tried to soothe the crying girl, who vowed never to forgive him for twisting their friendship. Yet the main character finally felt calm. On his way home, he sensed a strange lightness, as if the world around him was shining. He wondered why he had allowed her influence to weigh on him for so long, deciding he would rather face high school alone than surrender himself to someone who only pretended to be human. A quiet glow settled in his eyes as he accepted that he no longer needed to live in her shadow and felt newly unbound. His view of the world began to expand, marking the start of a different path. That night, attention shifted to an elderly man, the chairman of the Teikan group and the director of Teikan Academy, Takaya Rua. Someone called out to the elderly man, and his stern demeanor softened into that of a gentle grandfather. At the same time, the girl who grew up with the main character entered the room, eager to share what had happened. She complained that Kazu had been harsh toward her and claimed he was ending their friendship. The woman beside the grandfather turned toward her in surprise, asking if it was true that he had simply walked away from her. She was the girl's cousin, Takaya Rua. The girl, still shaken, insisted she couldn't believe it, saying Kazu had never once gone against her before. Her cousin, sweating nervously, questioned whether the girl had said something unkind to provoke him. The girl jumped slightly and denied it, explaining that she had only made comments about him being like a servant or how tiresome it felt to be his childhood friend. Everyone present immediately understood the issue. Her cousin pointed out how harsh those words were, and even the grandfather agreed, saying it was reasonable for Kazuma to be angry. The girl, unable to see the problem, claimed she had only been teasing him. But ever since Kazu entered high school, he had started wanting friends and a relationship of his own, and her behavior no longer felt harmless to him. To her, the entire idea sounded absurd. But Kika pointed out that wanting more friends was completely normal. Rua refused to accept it and shouted that it wasn't, insisting that Kazuma had always had her. She believed the cutest Rua in the world was always at his side, so the thought of him getting close to another girl felt impossible. Because of that, she felt it was only natural to tease him, since she saw herself as the only one who truly understood him. She admitted she cared about him, and that single detail was enough for their grandfather to immediately take her side, declaring Kazuma at fault. Kikura, however, remained the only one convinced Rua was mistaken and urged her to apologize. Rua resisted and insisted her cousin, who used to mentor Koma, could fix everything by getting him to say sorry, admit his feelings, and even give her a kiss. Kikura was stunned by how unreasonable Rua sounded. She then turned to her uncle, asking if he had planned for Koma to marry Rua, and he confirmed it, explaining that this was why Koma had been trained in martial arts and leadership. Rua had liked him since they were young, and someone with his talent was rare. Kikura agreed as she looked toward her fan, noting that she had never seen anyone quite like him. Since elementary school, he had consistently scored straight 3s out of 5, intentionally keeping slightly above average so he could blend in. It was all part of his preparation to remain Rua's shadow. But if he ever decided to aim higher, it wouldn't just unsettle the school or the country, it would shake the entire world. On top of that, he had always been popular with girls, to the point where she had lost track of how many had transferred away because they liked him. Because of that, he never noticed how many people admired him. Rua lifted her head proudly, saying that this was exactly what made him her Kuma. Chairman Takayashiki added that this was why he considered Kazuma a strong candidate to inherit the company. But Kika saw the situation differently. Now that he had severed his connection with Rua, he no longer needed to restrict himself, and she quietly anticipated the moment everything would start to unravel. That moment arrived the very next morning. The halls of Takaya Academy were filled with unease, and in the middle of the corridor sat Kazuma's desk and chair. The message was obvious. He had defied Rua, and this was the consequence. It was typical behavior from someone as privileged as her, eager to display how harsh and spoiled she could be. Even so, he didn't let it unsettle him. Instead, he calmly considered his choices. He could drag the desk back inside and listen to everyone mock him, or he could report it to the staff. But that made little sense, since the school was owned by her grandfather, the head of the Tei group. This academy wasn't ordinary. Tei Academy trained S-class talent, bringing in top-level students from around the world through scholarship programs for sports, arts, and academics. Anyone who excelled paid nothing, but the school operated on a strict hierarchy, almost like a real-world caste system, with clear upper and lower tiers. And at the highest point stood Rua, the self-declared princess. So the second option was pointless. Instead, Kazuma did something no one saw coming. He took out his pen and wrote a short note on the paper attached to the chair, saying he would be studying on his own and asking to be counted as present, since the order came directly from Princess Roar. The students around him froze, stunned by how clever the move was. Kazuma then walked off to another spot to focus, while also considering how troublesome things might become if anyone else learned about it. When he reached his destination, he revealed a hidden library underground, a place known only to him and a handful of others, since most students and even some teachers had no idea it existed. As a frequent visitor, the senior librarian allowed him inside from time to time. He moved down the stairs toward the entrance, deciding he would simply pass the hours there until the school day ended. He reflected on how he had always wanted a normal life, yet after standing up to Rua, he doubted he would make many friends or even hope for a girlfriend. With his hand on the door, he wished for a quiet life on his own. But when he opened it, he found piles of unfamiliar items stacked before him. In that moment, Kazuma had no clue what kind of story he was about to step into. His attempt at a simple life was about to collide with a group of unusual girls, and his peaceful days were already slipping away. As countless unseen eyes paid attention, a single girl began to stir chaos. Rua, cunning as ever, started her live stream on a channel with more than 191,000 followers. Today she used it to vent about someone who had annoyed her. She explained that she recently went to karaoke with several classmates, but one person ruined the atmosphere by leaving halfway through. Rua leaned toward the camera and addressed her viewers, whom she called her loyal subjects, reminding them that when a party is lively, they should never be the one to disrupt it. Then she shared her big announcement. She revealed a new project where she would be working with a voice actress named Mato Amune. Not only were they in the same agency, they also attended the same school. Their debut CD was coming out soon, and their first event was planned for the Sunday after next at Shine Mall. She ended the stream as thousands of supportive comments poured in. Returning to the present, Koma now stood uncomfortably at the door he had opened by mistake, lowering his eyes and apologizing for stepping in without permission. The girl inside, who had been startled moments earlier, gave a slight bow and introduced herself as Amina Mato, also apologizing for raising her voice. Feeling responsible for intruding, he admitted he should have knocked and asked whether she had learned about the hidden spot from the library committee leader. When she confirmed it, he realized he wasn't the only one who used the room and waited outside to give her time to change. After a few minutes, Amina opened the door again and invited him back inside, still apologizing for the delay. But as he stepped in, Koma couldn't hold back the question that had been weighing on him. He asked himself why she had been changing there and why she was wearing her gym outfit. Amina explained that she had only been searching for a quiet place to practice her singing and dancing. She was preparing for an upcoming event as a voice actress. That was when it struck him that she belonged to the entertainment field as well, much like Rua, another elite chosen by the academy. As he looked around, he noticed a large mirror she had brought with her, proof of how committed she was. It also made him wonder why she wasn't in class. Amina lowered her eyes. That morning, she had arrived to find her desk and chair placed in the hallway with a note saying there was no seat for her. Kazuma froze. He recognized the pattern, the setup, the embarrassment, and her earlier tears suddenly made sense. At that moment, his phone vibrated with several messages from Rua. She demanded to know where he was and asked whether he had watched her latest video. She hinted that she might reveal his name in her next stream and let her followers go after him unless he returned his desk to the classroom and begged. The expression on his face showed his disgust. He looked back at Amina, still confused. If she was one of Tei's special scholarship students, why was she working so hard in secret? But even as a voice actress, she admitted she wasn't well known. She believed it was because of her appearance and her voice. Kazuma couldn't let her put herself down. He reached into his bag and told her he couldn't clearly see her face through her long bangs, but he thought her voice sounded pleasant. The comment left her quietly flustered. To her, none of his compliments felt true. She insisted that many people had far better voices, and compared to Shua Takayashiki, she felt insignificant. Even so, she had been placed in a unit with Rua, which likely explained the recent harassment. During Rua's livestream the day before, Amina was hit with a wave of harsh comments. Viewers claimed that Rua's reputation would suffer if she worked with someone like her. The remarks were cruel, but they raised the question of why Rua had chosen to partner with her at all. Amina was stunned when Kazuma repeated some of the things he had heard and warned him not to say anything like that out loud. If anyone at school overheard him criticizing Rua, it would cause serious trouble. But with only the two of them present, he let the thought slip. Amina then admitted that the decision hadn't been hers anyway, it was made by the agency. Because they viewed her as plain and quiet, they decided she would fit best in a supporting role behind Rua's spotlight. It was harsh, but typical of the TAY music industry, which would do anything to promote Rua. Kazuma had no trouble believing that the desk and chair incident had been Rua's idea, and even though the agency planned the pairing, he suspected Rua couldn't tolerate the idea of being matched with someone she considered beneath her. Before he could finish speaking, she cut him off, explaining that she didn't mind being in the background. It was a rare opportunity for her, and she didn't want to hinder anyone. Instead, she wanted to put in her best effort. Her determination genuinely impressed him. He asked if that was why she had come to the hidden library to practice, and when she confirmed it, he found himself quietly admiring how composed she seemed. He told her he would like to stay with her, though all he could really offer was simple feedback from an amateur's point of view, and he asked if that was acceptable. Before he even finished, Amina's eyes brightened. She gently took his hand and said she would rely on him from now on. Seeing her up close like that, Kazuma realized she was far more charming than Rua ever allowed herself to be. Time passed quickly, and soon it was already lunch. Amina had been practicing non-stop since morning, and Kazuma began to worry that she might be worn out. Then, from down the hallway, a loud voice called his name. Behind him stood Rua, demanding to know where he had been. His expression made it clear he didn't want to deal with this. She continued speaking sharply, pressing him about why he had been avoiding her. She also noticed that she had been blocked on Messenger. She believed no one should ignore Rua-sama and wondered if her own looks were the reason someone avoided facing her. While she grew annoyed, the main character kept walking without reacting. Her frustration rose as she tried to call after him, but the voice that followed was not hers. A delinquent boy stepped in instead, irritated that the main character stayed silent, insisting it was disrespectful to Rua-chan. His name was Asano, a scholarship athlete from the baseball club, known as a promising player. Instead of practicing, he spent his time hanging around someone she viewed as undeserving, and she felt he would be better off training like Minato. As Asano's temper built, he glared at the main character, convinced he was being mocked. He suddenly threw a punch, demanding some kind of response, but the main character moved before it could land. Asano felt no impact and became confused, realizing the target was no longer in front of him. The main character now stood behind him, and unease washed over Asano. He questioned how the other had slipped past him so easily and wondered if his swing had simply missed. He began to doubt his own strength, thinking it made him look weak. The main character observed his poor form, noting how off-balance Asano seemed, which only fueled the boy's anger even more. As the tension rose, Asano prepared to swing again, but Rua stepped in and forced him to stop. Her sudden interruption startled him, and she made it clear that only she had the right to challenge Kazu in any serious way. She insisted that no one else was allowed to touch him unless she permitted it, and although Asano barely understood her reasoning, he backed down because she still cared deeply for the main character. Kazu then addressed Rua by name, his tone bright enough to fluster her, but his next words struck her even harder. He reminded her that no one had the right to intimidate or mistreat him, regardless of who they were, and his firm warning left her shocked. he stepped away and told her to leave him alone. She sank to the ground as her classmates rushed to comfort her, confused by his reaction, but deep inside she only found him more impressive. Her fixation on him grew even stronger. A week later, Minato was practicing in the hidden library, moving gently to the rhythm of her steps. She lost her balance for a moment and nearly fell, but the main character caught her in a graceful hold. The close moment left her flustered as she apologized for stumbling yet again. He reassured her, explaining that he simply didn't want her getting injured before the real event. She admired how he always managed to catch her whenever she slipped, no matter where they were, and she believed it showed how much he had been supporting her since that day. She admitted how much his support meant to her and broke into tears as she thanked him with everything she had. The main character froze for a moment, surprised, since no one in his life had ever expressed gratitude like that. He insisted he had not done anything remarkable, then shifted his focus to her routine. He pointed out that her return to center stage might look smoother if she walked back normally instead of spinning, since she always lost her balance during that part. She considered his suggestion, and he proposed another idea, wondering if a single leap back to the center might have more impact during the performance. She immediately dismissed it, explaining that the distance was far too great, at least 5 meters. He agreed, but also demonstrated how using the strength in her legs could make it possible. In one swift motion, he launched himself across the space and landed as if it were effortless. The display left her stunned. She could not understand how he moved with such height and ease, comparing it in her mind to bouncing off a trampoline. She believed no ordinary person could do that, and even thought his athletic grades must be exceptional. He simply mentioned that his physical education scores had always been average, which only confused her more. He shifted the topic again, pointing out that her posture still leaned forward. She admitted she had struggled with slouching for years and that even her choreographer had scolded her about it. The main character observed her carefully, as if considering a solution. He then suggested she might try using her natural slouch to her advantage instead of fighting it. As he demonstrated, his body shifted into a motion that resembled the careful, low sweep of a cat's paw. He showed her how that stance could flow into a controlled movement, something she could adapt into her routine. She followed his guidance without hesitation, matching every pose and angle he demonstrated, and he struggled to stay composed under the weight of her charm. The new approach seemed to finally make sense to her. Koma even suggested that her designer create cat ears and a tail to suit the theme, and she seemed excited at first. Then she realized she could not use such an outfit during her joint performance with Rua, since it would not fit the style and she was meant to serve as background support. Kuma paused and asked if she was truly fine with that limitation. She explained that singing and dancing were not her strongest skills anyway, and she would rather have him watch her practice acting. Since she worked as a voice actor, she hoped to express herself like an animated character. She was pushing herself now in hopes that it might open new doors in the future. Koma admired how bright and motivated she became whenever she talked about voice work. To him, she seemed full of energy and ambition. He admitted to himself that he envied that drive, since he felt he had no dream of his own. When she asked what he wanted to become, the only thought that came to him was the desire to live an ordinary life. He wished for a simple life he could feel proud to claim as his own. Even so, she believed he could reach that goal, and her confidence in him was enough to draw a quiet smile to his face. Feeling a new closeness forming, Aman used the moment to ask something more personal. She had heard about his recent clash with Rua and wondered if it had happened because of her. He made it clear that she was not the cause. Still unsure, she mentioned the long history he shared with Rua and assumed it must be difficult for him, but he no longer saw Rua as a childhood friend. That reassurance gave Aman the courage she needed. She gathered herself, ready to share her feelings, and asked the question she had been holding back. Before she could finish, the atmosphere shifted. The so-called witch suddenly appeared in the narrow space, demanding to know what the two of them were doing. In an instant, chaos erupted as Rua stormed into the hidden library. She had heard Kuma was there, but she clearly had not expected to find him with someone else. Rua demanded to know why he was spending time with what she considered a worthless voice actress, insisting Aman was nowhere near her level of popularity. The insults came fast, reducing Aman to nothing more than trash in her eyes. As Rua kept talking, everything suddenly connected for her. This was the reason Kuma had been slipping away after school. He had been meeting another girl, and the realization pushed her to tears. yet no one around felt inclined to comfort her because her outrage had long worn thin. She refused to let it go, claiming that Koma belonged at her side. Aman tried to calm the situation by placing all the responsibility on herself, explaining that Koma had only been helping her. But the moment she used his first name, Rua reacted instantly. She rushed forward, grabbed Aman by the collar, and demanded to know who allowed her to address him so casually. Rua insisted she stick to calling him Suzuki, declaring that getting close to him was far beyond her place. She even assumed Aman's hidden eyes were unattractive, but the moment she saw them, the shock hit her like a punch to the stomach. Realizing Aman had shown Koma that gentle expression, Rua panicked and produced duct tape from nowhere, trying to force Aman's bangs back down. Koma finally stepped in, ordering her to stop, reminding her that they were all supposed to be part of the same group. Rua dismissed the idea, insisting that Aman was nothing more than a background extra, and therefore she could treat her however she wanted. Kazuma refused to accept Rua's behavior any longer. He reminded her that the girl she dismissed as a mere sidekick had been training every day just to keep up with her, and Rua had no right to interfere. His stance left Rua completely bewildered. She could not understand why he would defend Aman when she believed their childhood connection should have placed her above everyone else. Kazuma saw it differently. He supported those who put in real effort, and he repeated once more that he and Rua were no longer childhood friends. The intensity behind his words made his anger unmistakable. Rua tried to regain her composure, asking if he was still upset about what happened before, insisting she had only been joking. He could hardly believe it. Her so-called jokes had shaken him deeply, and he wondered how many others she had hurt with the same excuse. At her age, she should have already learned the difference between acceptable teasing and outright cruelty. In truth, she was the one who needed to understand her place. His blunt tone left her trembling. Without waiting for anything more, Kazuma stepped past her and motioned for Aman to follow. Rua tried to protest, insisting she was cuter than Aman and could never lose to someone she saw as a low-tier voice actress, but they were already out the door before she could gather her thoughts. Outside, Aman lowered her head, convinced she had caused Rua's outburst. Kazuma assured her she was not at fault. In fact, the incident gave him an idea. If they used Rua's oversized pride against her, they might be able to throw her off balance completely. Kazuma called the idea the Aman Dance operation. After stopping by a convenience store, he handed Aman a small black cat-shaped hair clip and asked if she had a YouTube channel, suggesting she wear the accessory and upload her newest cat-themed dance. He believed it would draw attention. Aman hesitated, admitting she barely had any subscribers and doubted anyone would notice her video. Kazuma reassured her, explaining that he already had a plan, and all he needed was for her to trust him. His certainty helped settle her worries, and after thinking it over, she agreed. But he had another request. He wondered if she could lift her bangs for the recording, insisting she looked genuinely adorable. The thought of showing her face made her nervous, and she explained that hiding behind her bangs kept her calm. Curious, he asked whether her agency had ever commented on it, but he also recognized why they might not have. Her covered appearance fit the supportive image they wanted her to maintain. As Kazuma pieced everything together, he realized that this had likely been the intention from the start. He found it unfair, believing she should have been working independently long ago. Aman explained that, in fact, the group was already set to disband after the upcoming event. She treated it as nothing out of the ordinary, but Kazuma felt only frustration, convinced that the entertainment industry had become far too cutthroat. Aman felt it was only natural that the agency favored Rua, since it was run by Rua's grandfather. In terms of popularity and appearance, she believed Rua was far beyond her reach. Facing someone with such influence and status made her question whether it was even fair to compete. Hearing this, Kazuma realized her lack of confidence was not a personal flaw, but a product of her environment. She had been raised in a world, whether school or showbiz, where standing out invited criticism, and people constantly tore others down to protect their own positions. It made perfect sense why Aman's self-assurance was so low. She called out to him by his last name, asking if he and Rua had been childhood friends and noting that she seemed to like him. To Kazuma, it was mildly irritating, but he also wanted her to know she could call him Koa. The news thrilled Aman, and she eagerly asked if he could call her Aman in return. He did so without hesitation, leaving her glowing with excitement. Emboldened, she vowed to give her best for the upcoming video shoot. In no time, the video went live. On a channel with just 41 subscribers, a bright and cheerful Amon introduced herself as the voice actress, performing the Aman Dance, and then she launched into an impressive routine that included backflips. Aman likely repeated the same move Kazuma had taught her earlier. At the end of the video, slightly out of breath, she faced the camera and announced that she would be performing live this Sunday, inviting anyone who was free to attend. She also reminded viewers to subscribe to her channel, a request that made Kazuma smile as he watched from his phone. He could not help but notice how charming her entire performance was, even as a few negative comments from Rua's fans appeared. Still, there were genuine viewers among them. Curious, Kazuma checked Rua's channel not out of interest, but purely to gather information. Rua was in full meltdown mode, shouting insults at nearly everyone except Kazuma, which revealed that her previous threat to have her fans hunt him down had been empty. Since then, her channel had grown to 1.1 million subscribers. Yet, she continued to rage over Kazuma not recognizing her talents. By the end of her outburst, she returned to the cheerful and bubbly persona she displayed online. She admitted that her earlier emotional display was acting, a way to channel her recent frustration, and it made her consider that perhaps she could pursue acting as well. She ended the video, leaving Kazuma staring at the screen, unsure what he had just witnessed. Yet his resolve only strengthened. If this was how she wanted to compete, he would respond without holding back. Unfortunately, Rua's video exploded online, gathering over 20,000 views in just 3 hours. Aman's video, by contrast, had only reached about 52 views in 2 hours. Still, Kazuma thought her performance was genuinely adorable, and all that remained was for the world to notice. He already had a plan to help. Though usually quiet and friendless in real life, Kazuma had a different presence online. In a mobile game he played, he served as the vice leader of a large clan, giving him some influence. In just a few days, Aman's video surpassed 500,000 views. She was shocked, wondering what he had done to achieve such growth, but Kazuma insisted he had only helped share it a little. The truth was clear. The video's success was thanks to Aman's skill and effort. Her talent had carried it, and his support had simply helped it reach more eyes. Hearing the news made Aman genuinely happy. She even mentioned running into someone who promised to attend her event. Yet she wasn't the only one promoting it. Rua had plastered posters everywhere. To Kazuma, all that remained was for Rua to take the bait, and she did just that, falling perfectly into the trap he had set. Rua appeared unfazed, while Aman was surprised to see her wearing cat ears. Rua quickly got to the point, claiming she had seen their video but was certain Aman had no chance of winning. This Sunday would be the ultimate cat ear showdown, a contest to determine who was the cutest and most popular. Kazuma had anticipated her move. It had been part of his plan all along. He noticed the slight twitch at the corner of her lips and realized she lacked confidence. With everything aligned, Kazuma was ready to make his next move. On the day of the event, he arrived early to support Aman, but found her waiting by the wrong door. It turned out Rua had instructed her manager to keep Aman away from her dressing room, unwilling to share the space with someone she considered insignificant. Aman decided to wait in a nearby storage room instead. Kazuma saw the bright side, thinking it might actually be beneficial since they would be undisturbed. He reminded her that showtime was approaching and encouraged her, confident in her abilities. He had been watching her progress all this time and knew just how much she had improved. Still uncertain, Aman asked why he was willing to go so far for someone like her, a question that had been on her mind for a while. For Kazuma, the answer was simple. He felt their school was stifling, favoring scholarship students at every turn. While this kind of inequality existed everywhere, the treatment of lower-ranked students was painfully obvious. If someone like Aman, not a scholarship student, could stand out, it might expose the cracks in the school's system. More than that, seeing how hard she had been working made him want to support her. Reaching into his bag, he remembered the custom-made cat ears he had prepared for her. He had wanted to create something that suited her perfectly. Handing it to her, Aman expressed her gratitude, saying how happy it made her and promising to give her best effort. That wasn't exactly the way the cat ears were meant to be worn. Kazuma gently moved Aman's bangs aside, showing her how it should sit, confident it would suit her perfectly. Aman's face flushed bright red, leaving her momentarily speechless. Kazuma recalled a recent time he had gone out for karaoke and visited a salon for a new haircut, hoping to feel transformed. In reality, everyone had just laughed and pointed. unlike the typical stories in novels. Amane, however, was different. She had the potential to shine. She dreamed big and had worked tirelessly to reach this moment, though her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door signaling her turn. Kazuma extended his hand, encouraging her to step forward and capture every one of Rua's fans. Taking his hand, she surged toward the door, ready to give the performance of a lifetime. If you liked the video, please drop a like and subscribe to stay tuned for the next part.